And nobody was stealing it.
No. I had to put one in. Very cheap. Why we find
Yep. Are we good, Brandon? Brandon, we good?
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to. Welcome to our May. Welcome to our May 9th. Oh, thank you. Welcome to our May 9th council meeting. Just want to go through our evacuation plan. In the event of an emergency, please exit out the two doors to our left or this front door here. We would meet across the street at the school administration building and await further instructions. Now, if we could all stand for our Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for the men and women serving in harm's way. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic one nation, okay, thank you all. All right, let's start with our roll call.
Ms. Jufuza? Here. Ms. Abbott? Here. Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mr. Katzman?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Dr. Ryan?
Here.
Mr. Aguiar?
Here. Okay. Next is our President's executive summary. I do not have any updates for the executive summary. We will move on to our consent agenda.
Mr. President, I'd like to move consent agenda item B from the consent agenda and place it on the, as the last item on the business agenda.
2B.
2B, sorry.
Well, we just put it in the regular license.
Either way.
Right. Yeah. So, Mr. President, I would make a motion that we approve as presented all items on the consent agenda except item 2B, which we will move to the Board of License Commissioners.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jufuza?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguiar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, so now we'll be sitting as the Board of License Commissioners. First item is the entertainment license for the Portsmouth Youth Soccer Association.
Move to approve their license for June 17th through the 19th.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jufuza?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguiar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Next, we have a public hearing. It's a liquor license application new.
No, I was going to make a motion to open the public hearing.
Okay, so we're having a public hearing for the application for a BV alcoholic beverage license from the Narragansett Bay Club, Amenity LLC, DBA the Narragansett Bay Club, 195 Newport Harbor Drive. I believe we have a request to continue this to our May 23rd
Yes, Mr. President.
meeting.
So a motion to open the public hearing, but there was never a second.
Second.
Ah.
There we go.
Move to
A motion to
table
continue
this
this.
until the
To
May
continue.
23rd hearing.
Correct.
First it or seconded, depending who you want to.
Okay,
credit to that.
so do you want to vote on the opening of the public hearing first?
Let's do this.
Sure, yes.
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7 to
A
0.
motion to continue the public hearing till May 23rd.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7 to 0.
And I will make a motion to approve the peddler's license for Pete's Ice Cream, 122 Viking Drive, Portsmouth, Rhode Island.
Mr.
Second.
President, I'll be recusing myself from this vote as a close family member owns this business.
You don't need to go far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to influence
Just-
our vote.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
And Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 6 to 0 and one recusal. Okay. We have
Motion to adjourn as the Board of License Commissioners.
Seconded.
all those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7 to 0. On to minutes from our April 25th and 26th meetings.
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7 to 0. On to our town administrators report. Mr. Rayner?
Good evening, Mr. President, Town Council, ladies and gentlemen. Our finance director has informed me that she will resign effective June 2nd. Lisa has accepted a new position in her field at a major university. Obviously, I'm very sad to see her go. She's made a very positive mark on Portsmouth, and it was an honor and a pleasure to work with Lisa. I wish her all the best in this new and exciting opportunity for her and her family. Appropriate ads and employment announcements have been made, and I will work with Human Resources to secure a new candidate for your approval as soon as possible. Our new town planner, Leah Hitchens, started today. She will work alongside Gary Crosby until his retirement at the end of June. She's here tonight, learning how to use, are you there? There she is. Learning how to use the new chamber electronic system. Welcome aboard, Leah. The Portsmouth Award. We are now accepting nominations for the annual Portsmouth Award. This award, to refresh your memory, is an annual recognition for an individual, a local business, or an organization that exemplify the best characteristics of and for Portsmouth, to include consistently demonstrated excellence in professionalism and community leadership, the exhibition of outstanding initiative, inspirational leadership and organizational skills, has made or is making significant contributions to the welfare of the community, and has given freely of their time and energy for the betterment of our community. Details will be posted on the town website and in a pending press release. Nominations are due May 31st. The online Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Master Plan online or community survey is still open. The online community survey can be accessed from our town website by clicking on the link at the banner on the top of our website. The survey should only take about 5 to 10 minutes to complete, and all responses are anonymous. Once completed, the master plan will enable the town to proactively plan for and meet the needs of residents while also enhancing our quality of life. With respect to the fiscal year 23 budget, the proposed town budget was provisionally approved during the recent budget meetings. Our public hearing will be held at 7 p.m. on June 15th at the middle school auditorium. Final budget approval will be June 27th at the town council meeting on that date. And then tomorrow, there will be a community leadership meeting hosted by the Naval Station Commanding Officer, and I will be attending with Gary and Leah. And additionally, just another reminder that we have begun our transition from a .com to a .gov domain. Any new email sent from our network will be from the .gov address, and all emails sent to us with the Portsmouth.com address will still arrive. The town website has already been changed to the .gov domain, but using portsmouthri.com will still bring you to our website. And that concludes my report.
I just have a question on that. Is that in perpetuity, the .com? Or I've been asked, how long is the .com? last?
Let's ask our IT. How long will that
As
last?
long as we would like. We can keep it going, perpetuity, and we can send it. My recommendation is just let it stay there.
Yep.
Don't stop anybody else from trying to find that domain and spoof it.
Thank you.
Mr. Crosby has his hand up.
For those of you that have saved lots of Portsmouth.com emails, when you do search your archive, just remember you'll have to search it as the .com address. Otherwise, it may not show up in your searches.
Ray, can you bring up Mr. Crosby? He's got his hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say two things. One, thank you, Lisa, for your service, and I wish you well. I think that and well for the organizing the budget and the town. And I'm sorry to see you go. And also, secondly, I can't be more delighted about Lisa or about Leah. Leah, we have Lisa 1, Lisa 2, now we have Leah. I can't be more delighted about Leah taking over for me, and I'm going to, I officially am going to give her my Portsmouth this week. So there we have it.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Mr. Rayner, were you done or no?
Yeah, that concludes my report. Thank you.
All right. I wasn't sure. All right. Thank you, Mr. Rayner. Okay, on to our resignations and appointments. First, we have resignation actually for the Conservation Commission and the dog park. Same
Move to
person.
accept with regret the resignation of Miss Mary Beth Clark.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa? Aye. Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next, we have appointments. First is the reappointment to the Parks and Recreation Committee.
Motion to reappoint David Fiorillo, Catherine Galliano, and Mimi Grecian.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next, we have a reappointment for the Planning Board.
Move to reappoint Mr. Garcelle.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next, we have the Economic Development Committee.
Motion to approve Ms. Amy Holman.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. Next, we have the Harbor Commission.
Move to appoint Katie Egan to the Harbor Commission.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye, motion passes 7-0. And finally, we have the Planning Board.
Motion to appoint Nora Kane Daly.
Second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, moving on to old business. First item under old business is discussion of a possible solar workshop with the planning board. If you all recall back in November and December, we were concluding our public hearing on the solar ordinance and incorporating some amendments to our zoning ordinance. We did enact 3 changes to our solar ordinance in November. And during that time, I went back and listened to the meeting, and I will admit it was a little off. I did indicate during the meeting that these changes were temporary. That is not true. Those ordinances, when we enacted them, those are part of the ordinance now. So those changes are permanent. We did discuss the need or potentially setting up a workshop as well as a moratorium. We kicked that to our December 12th meeting where we did enact the 6-month moratorium. And part of that was the 6-month moratorium would allow us some additional time to potentially have a workshop. We have not had that workshop. So we're here tonight to discuss the potentially scheduling a workshop. If we do it, we would have to, the moratorium is in effect until June 13th. If necessary, we could extend the moratorium, but the moratorium was only for large and medium solar. When we made those other changes, that prohibited solar within residential areas. So really the moratorium was more focused on large and medium solar petitions. So if we need to extend the moratorium, we can do that if we are going to have a workshop. So I guess what I'm here tonight is to discuss the need for the workshop, what would be the framework for the workshop, and then possible dates. When in going back and looking at my notes, and this is all up for discussion, there were 5 items that we were talking about as considering 5 changes to the ordinance. Essentially, when we made the changes to the ordinance, that addressed, I believe, 3 of the 5 items. The items that were not addressed or partially addressed were definition of a utility scale solar energy system. Utility scale, number 2 would be the utility scale solar system. And then the 3rd item, which I think we addressed to some extent, there was maximum lot coverage is limited to the requirements of each zoning district, 25% in commercial, light industrial, and heavy industrial zoning districts, and 30% in WD zoning districts. When we made our changes, we limited how much could be cleared and how much could be developed. So, those were the 5 items that were being considered during the solar ordinance amendments. We did enact changes. If we do move forward with a workshop, I would like to just try to keep it to those items that we were discussing and not revisit this entirely. This item with the solar workshop has already gone before the planning board twice. They did render their opinion. We do have that on record. So we could go back to a workshop and discuss the merits of the ordinance. If there's a need for any modifications, So that's what's on the table tonight. Thoughts from counselors?
It seemed to me, Mr. President, that the last meeting we had that encompassed all the zoning and the ordinance changes tightened up the ordinance significantly. And that would be the purpose of having the public hearing. The public hearing was discussed before we made the changes to the ordinance,
The workshop.
the workshop.
Workshop.
Yes.
The workshop. So being that we've already tightened up the ordinance, I think it's the workshop has become unnecessary, since most of the work was done by tightening up the ordinance. And having the workshop at the planning board, who already decided that it was okay the way it was and sent it back to us, I don't think we're going to see any other major changes to it. So, and if somebody has a specific change they would like to make to the ordinance, they can always bring that forward to the council at any time.
Any changes to an ordinance, though, would be vetted through the public hearing
whole
process all
process.
over again.
Right.
So even if we were to go the route of a workshop, any discussions that come out of that would then still be referred back to the full planning board for a public hearing process, and then back to the council for a public hearing process similar to what we went through in November. So I do agree that when we made those changes, I believe we definitely addressed some of the big points that were concerns for citizens. We eliminated it within all the residential districts. We increased setbacks, and we further limited how much land could be cleared when we made those changes. So I do agree that we have significantly improved the ordinance. Some may say it's not perfect, but I do think it's a significant improvement to what we were previously looking at. There was, when I say improvement, significant restrictions that would, further protect residential properties abutting these potential sites. So again, we can continue. I'm opening the floor for discussion, and then we'll see where we go. Ms. Abbott?
I think I agree with you. I think the changes that we did enact addressed the biggest issues that we had with the ordinance. If we are confident that those changes are permanent and will stay in the ordinance, then it does kind of eliminate the need for another hearing and workshop and whatnot.
They are permanent. I misspoke at the meeting. Our ordinance is changed. It is effective. And so it would take an act of going back to the planning board, back to the council to undo those.
Yeah.
So, it's taken me this long to get this back on the agenda because I really wasn't sure how to move this forward.
Yeah. So if I, Mr. President, so the only thing that's not permanent is the moratorium, which by its
Right.
nature is
Yeah.
sunsets.
And that was only a moratorium on new applications.
Correct.
Right.
And in the course of, following that and other discussions that this panel has had from the hearing and adopting the changes, which I think were proposed by Ms. Abbott, adopting those, I recall wanting a workshop to, gain further clarity on what types of things we might do. And we've done them. So I don't know that a workshop is really, I agree. I don't think a workshop is, would be leading towards any particular type of action at this point. We've taken the action.
I would agree. But we did indicate that we did discuss workshop in 2 meetings. So rather, I figured if we are not going to have a workshop, I want to at least get that out front and take some comments. I know there's some folks here tonight that may want to speak to it. So I will open it up to allow you to speak.
Can I just ask one quick question? Did you discuss this with the planning board? I guess my only thought is that maybe the planning board would want a workshop to discuss the thing we change in the ordinance, but if they don't, then I don't really see.
I haven't had that discussion with the planning board. We do have Mr. Lopes from the planning board here tonight.
Oh.
Could ask Mr. Lopes to weigh in.
Yes, Mr. President, council members. We are fully aware of the changes that you made. That is now part of the ordinance. Any new applications that come forward, we will execute under the guidelines that were put forth in the changes from your November meeting. So that's us going forward. To the best of my knowledge, there's been no applications, obviously, because of the moratorium piece, nor have I heard of any that are pending. I think we still have one that is in the either in the preliminary or final stages. The rest have all been passed through and approved, and one was denied of the 4 that were before us.
So do you think the planning board feels there's a need for a workshop?
I don't want to speak for the full board, but I think from the last time that we went through this, we felt that the professional staff made recommendations. We went with those recommendations. Obviously, the will of the people kind of changed that in the council. So we're prepared to just go forward with what we have right now. I've heard no other rumblings that we have changes, and nor has Mr. Crosby informed us that there's any pending changes as well.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Lopes.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. If you'd like to speak, you can come on up. Just name and address.
Good evening, Lark Roderick, 73 West Passage. I just wanted to put out there that we weren't really aware of this meeting tonight. It just kind of came up, oh, there's something about the solar. And a lot of people in my neighborhood have really been waiting for a meeting. And I'm wondering if maybe there could be something where we could go over the changes so that people know what the changes are and kind of, I mean, I know that it's been kicked around a lot, but we've also learned a lot in the last year. And I think people are really unclear of what the solar ordinance is going to be now. And there's a lot of interest, I think, just passing it through, even though you're not just passing it through. I know you've worked hard on it. I think that if there was some clarity with people that have been exposed to it, it would be really helpful. I mean, in all across the state, the ordinance have been done and redone over and over again. And I know that Danielle has like really worked hard, but I think that instead of, doing something and then wishing we had done more, and people that like my neighborhood having to put up with the mistakes and pay the price for the mistakes, that I think real clarity on it would be really important to the residents. And that's just my opinion.
Thank you for those comments. We did vet those changes in a public hearing last November. Though that's what was discussed in a lot of detail in last November. And those were changes that I believe most of the audience was in support of.
Well, they were, and with all due respect, I was at every single meeting and I'm confused. So I think that it needs clarification. It was going to be one thing, then it was going to be another thing. And it's gone around the block so many times, excuse the pun, that, I think that there's a real uneasiness in town. It's not just my neighborhood, because you can sense that people really do not want this at all. And if it's going to come, I think that the neighbors have a right, not just my neighborhood, but other neighborhoods, to know exactly what they're headed towards. It's too late. It's too late. Once the ordinance is done, we see what happened. The solar company goes, it's all done. You can't do anything about it. So I'm just saying that I would rather be really sure and let people know. And if you have a forum and there's 4 people, there's 4 people. But I think that people are really interested. It's a huge issue all across the state, not just here. And I think that just knowing what the changes are and it being clear cut would really help. It's just.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
input on that. If I may,
Sure.
if I may
Sure.
sort of reflect on that. I understand where you're coming from. I don't know that it would call for a town council public hearing type of a thing, but rather the, I don't want to put work on anyone's plate, but the town planners department, welcome to Portsmouth, might schedule some sort of an explainer session, because we are talking about a statute, which is not necessarily the most accessible type of language, to put together an explainer of what the rules are for a general public audience and invite, an evening.
Solar 101.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we got the comment. We'll continue and then we'll circle back here after everybody's had an opportunity to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. President. Larry Fitzmaurice, 50 Kristen Court. I read the agenda before I came here, but I didn't get out of old business one that the council would consider, is going to consider canceling any further discussions. My memory, of course, is probably not serving me well. I thought we had the understanding when we came out of that long and I would say very successful meeting. Thank you, council. On the solar farm business, with an understanding that there would be other research being done and presented at a future meeting and considered for additions to the solar ordinance. Is that wrong? Am I wrong in that?
The intent of when we had discussions of the workshop, and again, we're all here, we were all part of this last November. We had proposed ordinance changes that would in the planning department had reviewed them, and that was what was discussed with the planning board, and they made the recommendations to the council. We also there were 5 items that were identified for consideration of modifications to the solar ordinance. There were 5 items that I touched base on, a couple of them briefly. We did enact, essentially when we made the ordinance changes, that addressed 3 of the 5 items. And I think the 3 that it addressed were the ones that I think gave residents the most anxiety, because it was, prior to the changes, you could allow solar in residential districts. That has all been eliminated. We've increased setbacks. I think we went from 50 feet to 150 feet. I mean, we really increased the restrictions, so to speak, on what would be an allowable an allowable solar development. So I think the discussion of a workshop came up because there was a member that spoke that said, and I believe it was a member from the planning board had got up and spoke and said, well, I was hoping we would have a workshop. And so the term workshop got kicking around because we were in the process of, could we have a moratorium? What were we going to do? We had a public hearing. During the public hearing, we needed to make a decision by the time the public hearing ended. Are we going to make changes or are we not going to make any changes? When we made the changes, that really kind of superseded a workshop because we implemented those changes. So now to undo those changes that we did in November, we would have to start that process all over again to undo the changes. Even if we want to add any more changes, you've got to go through the entire planning board process again and the council public hearing process. So am I saying we're not going to do it? No. If someone were to propose changes, that would go through the planning board and then back to the town council for any changes to the solar ordinance. We have not done any additional research or findings to further do anything with the solar ordinance. The issue was going to be whether or not did we really need to have the solar, do we really need to have the workshop because we implemented 3 very restrictive type requirements in the solar ordinance that now further protect the abutters or residents within the town of Portsmouth from solar development?
I would agree that the 3 adopted measures, modifications to the then existing solar ordinance were very positive. So I don't want to give the impression I don't. But my impression now is that purpose of the moratorium and the scheduling of a further public hearing was to consider any other recommendations that came forward. And, again, I haven't had an opportunity to research this. There was no backup either. So I wasn't sure what this was going to do. My impression was that this agenda item was to schedule a workshop, possibly a public hearing. So I hear resistance among members of the council for further changes to the zoning ordinance.
I wouldn't say it's resistance. I would say that I think that there's a sense of confidence that the changes that were implemented do further protect the citizens of the town.
Yes, but isn't that a little preliminary judgment because we have a moratorium on the 2 type of systems that everybody was
The
objecting?
moratorium is only for medium and large ground mounted systems
And new applications.
and new application.
Well,
There's a
that was,
moratorium on new applications because we couldn't stop the ones that are already in existence.
Right, but the moratorium is in effect immediately for a period of 6 months on the acceptance, processing, and or approval of any application for medium and large ground mounted solar systems, medium and large.
I understand that, but
So
you should understand that nobody was objecting to residential solar installations, at least not that I remembered anybody doing.
excuse me.
We were talking about,
What?
They were objecting to
Ground.
medium and large ground. You could still
Well,
put a ground
Yeah.
mounted small display
Exactly.
yeah,
in a residential area.
Yeah.
What was changed, and this, if you go
Yeah.
to the town's website and search solar ordinance, you could just pull up exactly what the changes are.
yes,
It's
I
a
know.
2-page document. It's very easy to find.
I actually have
And
it,
if I,
and I'll share it. I was going to share it with the
I can
woman who spoke
email it
first.
to.
and that is actually one of the reasons why I suggest that the town council not leave some sort of open-ended, let's come and talk about, if there are suggestions for improvement, suggestions for changes of any kind. This council will hear it after it's been vetted through the proper process. But to hold a workshop might imply that we're intending to do something when there's nothing on the table here that we're intending to do. So I wouldn't want to, some people will get alarmed if we have a workshop and we're talking about changing things. And I don't want to, so if people want to know more about what the current ordinance means, information can be gotten through town staff, town planner. If people are interested in proposing new things to do to the ordinance, that can go through its appropriate processes and we'll have hearings and other
but you're-
discussions at that point. But to just schedule a workshop for, at this point, we're not quite sure what we would talk about other than an open-ended discussion, which might bring out all kinds of proposals. I don't think that's appropriate. And so that's.
Yeah, I would argue, I mean, as I submitted all the changes, recommended changes to the ordinance, because we had an existing ordinance. We got feedback from very reputable organizations with recommendations for those changes. All of those were included in my suggested revisions. And thinking back on all of them, I think we've captured really the best of them and the most important ones. And so I think the ordinance is much better now than it was before. And it's almost like, I don't think we should go there. Because I think the changes that we were able to get into our ordinance are very positive for our town. You know, getting large solar and medium solar out of, you know, not even an option for residential is an excellent option, excellent change. And I think the 100-foot minimum setback on all sides and 150 feet where it abuts residential is a huge change and very positive and very much in line with all the feedback that we got. So, you know, if there was a huge cry from the planning board saying, oh no, we need to discuss these changes, then maybe our tune would be a little bit different right now. But I think we're, I think the changes are positive and we should go with them.
Well, again, I don't disagree that they're positive. What I would like to reiterate is that I thought the purpose of the moratorium was to consider additional changes. Otherwise, there wasn't any purpose to it.
Of which none ever came forward. So nobody has ever brought a change.
Yeah, but we haven't reached the deadline yet. Right?
Okay, so we have a month. So if somebody wants to come forward in a month and say, I have 45 different changes coming on, even if they've asked us, if we have that public hearing and they ask us to make those changes, it's not going to happen in a workshop. It's going to happen after vetting through the planning, zoning, and back to the town council. So it's, even if we have a workshop, if it would be the same, it would be less effective than somebody coming forward and saying, hey, I think we should change section 6.3, small solar energy systems to be not allowed in an R10. Instead of it should be an N, not an S. I'm just picking one out. But
Well, I can see the council wants to proceed with ending this process. Let me also just say, I'd like the council to be open in the future if anybody has an objection to the way it's written now or an addition, that you'll give them the opportunity to make their case.
we would give the opportunity, just like we give any other resident who has a concern about an ordinance. Any ordinance, whether it be leash law,
Okay.
dog parks, or anything else. I've never seen this council deny somebody their right to stand up there and speak to us. So
You haven't?
I haven't.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, you printed it out
I have it right here.
with the changes with the highlights and the reds and the blues.
Reds and the blues.
All right.
Sorry, I don't mean to beat a dead horse here, but I have called several times about getting together on this. I have several people that have asked me to be informed. I'm going to go back to them now and say that we were told that there was a forum, but there's no forum. And that the changes that were made, everybody thinks is good enough. But the people were not allowed to even voice what they thought might be an addition. And Daniela, thank you from the bottom of my heart, seriously, because if it wasn't for you, everybody else would be getting the setback that we're getting. So I really appreciate it. But what I'm saying is, I didn't come in here today and say, let's have a forum. I was told 6 months ago that there would be a forum. And so people are prepared for this forum. And I mean, everybody says get involved, but when you get involved, then you're told either you can't speak after you've written something, like I was at the last meeting, or that there won't be a meeting to even get together and after you've worked at something for 6 months. So it's very discouraging because you see how much power you have, which is like minimal. But like I said, huge improvement. I'm really happy for the improvements. Do I think it could be better with a forum? I do. But do I think it's worth your time? That you can only answer. And I know you got a lot on your plate. And so it's got to go from each meeting. And so it gets passed the way that it is.
But what specifically in a workshop or a forum, and I appreciate the fact that you're here standing up and fighting for it, that somebody couldn't have come up and asked us that tonight, or you could put it on next to council meeting and say, I would like an agenda item to discuss the solar ordinance
Well,
and these amendments. And
as
hand it
far
in.
as tonight goes, it really wasn't even clear what this was about tonight. I was notified at last minute, so maybe I missed it. You know, you've got to be on top of it or you'll miss it. And next thing you know, you'll have it out your window. So my husband's visiting his mother in the hospital. My sister had deadlines, and several other people in my neighborhood just couldn't make it on short notice. I mean, a forum has to be planned. It has to be planned for people to know. It can't be, you know, at last minute, a few people come up here. But I mean, I do think that this is a huge issue and that people are interested. And I do think that, you know, the changes, I appreciate them tremendously, but it's more that people were told and prepared for something. And I just have to say it's disappointing, even though kudos for the changes you did make.
Thank you. What's that? Okay. You've got the floor, Mr. Crosby.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know I had the floor. I'd like to make 3 points, if I may. Number one, I'd be more than happy to create a bullet point understanding of the ordinance and incorporating the new changes so Ms. Rodriguez could understand it better. Number two, for the council, I'd be more than happy to do analysis of how the new changes, amendments to the ordinance would affect solar development in Portsmouth. And number three, I'm certainly always willing to entertain and analyze any new changes that anyone suggests for the solar ordinance as it exists now.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Okay. Mr. Howard?
He's muted.
Yes, hi, David Howard, 36 Mariel Rose Drive. I would like to underscore what Lark spoke about in terms of expecting a workshop, being able to discuss some of the aspects of solar ordinances that are not in our current ordinance. I also would like to echo her appreciation for what the council has done. I know you're all suffering from solar fatigue, and I fully appreciate that. However, this doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like the people that have had the most invested in this over the years, not months, but years, are being denied an opportunity to speak collegially and together at some forum. If you think the solar ordinance is good enough, I don't think there are, well, I know there are people that would not agree with that. For example, I've brought up several times at previous meetings that one small part of Portsmouth is getting inundated with commercial solar arrays. And if the solar ordinance is not going to address that, it changes what our town feels like in this portion of town. So I, at the very least, and if I have to go through the planning board or Mr. Crosby or whoever, I would like to introduce that. But again, as Mr. Fitzmaurice said and Ms. Rodriguez has said, we feel like we're being denied an opportunity to input the process. Again, I know how sick and tired so many people are of discussing this. And I know that better can be the enemy of good enough. However, I just feel like there are people that would like an opportunity to address this one more time, even if it's just one more meeting. This feels a lot like bait and switch. where we felt that there was going to be a solar workshop, and now we're told, nope, it's good enough, don't need one. If you want to make changes, go through the whole process again. So although I really and truly appreciate the changes that are made, and I thank you for them, I don't think it's perfect, and I think there's still a way to go. And, I just would hate to see the door slammed on what we thought was going to be some kind of due process. And with that, thank you.
Mr. Howard, can I ask you a question though, before you disappear? You still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
So you do understand that even if we had a workshop and you brought forth these changes, we would still have to bring them back to the council and the planning board in order to change an ordinance that you are suggesting that needs to be changed. A workshop would not do that.
Well, it would give us a chance to consolidate input so that all the changes could be presented at one time. So you wouldn't have to get nibbled to death by ducks with all these people making their inputs one at a time.
Okay, so specifically to your point, we could still do that on a regular council agenda. This specific item is to have a workshop with the planning board, having 14 people sitting up here discussing the solar ordinance. If there are, and if you have a group of people that have 2 or 3 specific changes that you would like to hear and like to present to the council, you can do that any night you want, that we have a
Well,
council meeting. Let me specify that.
Yeah, once we get on the agenda. Well, if that's the way you want to play it, I guess that's the way it's going to be.
I mean, what it sounds like you want to ask for is no solar arrays on the west side of the town ever again. And obviously the one big one that sticks out and is a sore thumb is on Navy land that we can't do anything about. And the other one is on light industrial land, which still is legal at this point in time.
Well, it's legal. We've already heard the whatever they're doing over there, pounding stuff into the ground. And that's just the beginning before they start clearing. But I guess my point is that any part of Portsmouth could be inundated with solar arrays if there's not something in the ordinance that takes the town's character into consideration. And I know there's words to that effect in there, but if we're going to have arrays wherever people can put them within the ordinance, then someplace else can suffer the same fate that we're suffering.
Mr. Howard, I mean, you're using the word inundated. I gotta stop you with inundated. There's very few parcels that solar can go on. And we had that analysis done back in November. The places that people would look to develop solar now are on the allowable parcels, which would be commercial, light industrial, heavy industrial. That's where any large or medium scale solar project would go, is in an area that's specifically for commercial light industrial, which, you could have almost any type of development in commercial and light industrial. And solar is just a part of what would be allowed in commercial light industrial. You can no longer have solar in any residential zones unless it's small scale. And again, that'd be special use permit criteria, which does take into account all the characteristics that, we pride ourselves on with quality of life in Portsmouth. The special use criteria does take into account objectionable features, the comprehensive plan. There are several elements that a petitioner would need to overcome for a special use permit, and that's only for small scale solar. So, I think when you're referring to inundated, are you referring to inundated in commercial and light industrial parcels where solar would be allowed?
I'm referring to the fact that there are going to be 7 large commercial solar arrays within 2 miles of my house. And I have a lot of neighbors that are going to face the same issue. And
Mr. Howard.
granted, some of them are the Navy, 2 of them are the Navy. One's on Chase Farms, which I have no objection to. But so you're saying that the way the ordinance has been amended, this can't happen anywhere else?
It cannot happen in residential zones. We eliminated that in November. Any large or medium scale solar project is not allowed in any residential district. Small scale is by special use permit only. And the accessory roof mounted solar is what is permitted in residential zones, which is, I think you've seen that for a long time in Portsmouth.
Yes, and I have no objection to that either. If a farm wants to convert to solar from crops, is that going to be allowed in our solar ordinance?
If a farm,
If it is in a commercial zone, yes. If it is in a residential zone, no.
If it's zoned
Or light industrial.
agricultural?
we don't have an
agriculture.
agricultural
We have
zone.
commercial, residential, light industrial.
Okay, so a farm is a commercial venture then?
No, I think
No.
most of our farms are zoned
Residential.
residential.
Farms,
And-
I believe you can farm on almost any parcel under the Right to Farm Act. So you could have farming going on now on a light industrial or a commercial property. Yeah, as well as residential. But you cannot put a large or medium solar array on a residential parcel. That we stopped in November.
Okay,
And even a light industrial or commercial parcel, if it abuts a residential neighborhood, would have to meet the 150-foot setback.
On the residential side, yes. I mean, maybe a workshop isn't necessary, but maybe a information session might be helpful to explain the ordinance to folks, because maybe there's a misunderstanding of what's in the ordinance. But the ordinance is, we vetted this in a lot of detail in November. And these were concerns that we heard from residents. And we incorporated those changes into the ordinance. A lot of these items were discussed back in November. Yes.
okay, well, I would appreciate something
Yeah.
that encapsulates all of what the solar ordinance changes have done, so that we can, so that we can better understand whether or not we're going to face any future development that will have the same adverse impact that we've seen.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
I think one of the things that the forum would cover is what David's talking about. We'll take, for example, the Hilltop Solar farm that's going in solar, whatever. A lot of that property, as you know, is all residential surrounding industrial. There are also homes that abut that are commercial, homes that have no commercial business. My neighbor down on West Main Road, because she has a home on a commercial piece of property, she only got a 50-foot setback. So there are, whatever that expression is, the devil's in the details. These are things that they're not being changed with the changes, and they're going to affect people. And that's the situation, because when you say it can only be done on industrial and it abuts residential and it's 150 feet for a large solar farm, that is not a lot. I know, Daniela, that you started with 200 feet, which, I mean, when you're really looking at that, I mean, I'd like to put a garage and it's going to be 30 feet away from my neighbors. So then you have this huge industrial, there are some things that just are not getting covered. And I think that they're going to come back to bite us. I know you can't cover everything, but I'm just saying, if you look at what has happened, that commercial, it being near commercial and it can go in industrial, it's not going to protect the residential that are on commercial property, which in Portsmouth, there is that. So just saying that there are a lot of things that could be covered in a forum that haven't been covered.
I think that's a good point also, but it's probably a broader zoning issue and won't necessarily be solved with our solar ordinance.
Right. That's a separate issue where we discussed that. We discussed that during the solar ordinance. There are a lot of properties in Portsmouth where homes have been built on commercial or light industrial land, but that's, the zoning goes with the land. So the land is zoned commercial, so they benefit from the setbacks and all that stuff that are associated with commercial and light industrial. The setbacks are the setbacks. If we can't change, we cannot start rezoning all these areas, spot zoning. Mhm. Yeah, sorry.
Put in a solar array because it's commercial in a residential area.
You would have to meet all the setback requirements because you're abutting residential, so you'd have to have 150 feet
On both sides,
on all sides.
Yeah, and I said this when I proposed these changes, but this goes both ways. Like in your situation, the correct course of action to solve your problem is to apply for a zone change for your lot. If you don't want your house to be on a commercial lot, then you should go through the process and get it to a residential zone. I said the same thing for somebody who wants to put a solar farm on a residentially zoned parcel, is they should go through the process and change it to the appropriate zone for what they want to do in that parcel, because a residential lot shouldn't have industrial uses on it.
I do understand that, but I also understand that the poor woman that lived on the commercial lot that got the 50 feet from this monstrosity right near her house, she didn't even realize that she lived on a commercial lot until this all
and
happened.
That's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. And as an older person and an older homeowner, I can say when you buy a house, really check your surroundings and your zoning. But like my neighbors that just built a house right near me, they paid a huge amount for this house. They could have bought anywhere. They chose Portsmouth. And now they are going to overlook a solar farm. It's like, I think to myself, well, if they were older, they would have known better to check that. But I think when you're inviting people into the town, you're also like giving them a little bit of like what you're buying into will be protected. I just think that if you want people to come here and feel good about it, I go to the dog park and somebody asked me about this meeting tonight. And I said, well, we fought it, but it went in anyway. And they said, "Ooh, is that going to happen to us?" They just moved here from Connecticut. They were in love with Portsmouth. And I was happy to tell them, luckily you'll have a little bit bigger setback because of this. Because if that didn't happen, I would have felt like I had wasted my last year coming here. So I'm happy that it paid off in some way for my neighbors, for other people. But to just expect people to know that they bought a house that's going to be near something and that's their tough luck, I just think the town needs to protect them more.
Well, it's the realtor's responsibility also to
No,
help them.
no, that's not going to happen, right?
But
Ask my neighbors.
it should be.
Mr. Crosby again?
Thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that I'd be more than happy to make some sort of a bullet point summary of the ordinance as it stands now with the new amendments and its effect on the number of properties that will be impacted by, or that will be regulated by the solar ordinance, and that be happy to do an analysis going forward if anybody wants it. I think that, well, I'll leave it at there. I think that, no, sorry,
Mr. Crosby, until when are you with us?
the end of June.
Should we put something on the agenda to have a presentation of the solar ordinance as in its current iteration and the changes?
Well, I think that that's probably a good idea as a substitute for a joint workshop that takes up the planning board and the town council's time. Sure.
Yes, because planning board members would certainly be welcome to attend the meeting as well.
I mean, we could do that. We could just put it on an agenda and review the changes for the general public.
And I think also the general public should review Article 15 of the zoning ordinance, which outlines the procedures for amending the zoning ordinance. If there is any additional amendments to the zoning ordinance that somebody wants to propose, it has to go through the Article 15 regulations. And so it's not going to come out of a workshop. It's going to come out of the regulations outlined in Article 15.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby.
Thank you.
So let's just circle back to the agenda item, which was discussion of a possible solar workshop with the planning board. I think a better course may be to just put an agenda item on our council meeting in a couple of
First meeting in June.
first meeting in June.
We wouldn't want it to be Mr. Crosby's last council meeting.
Yeah. Our first meeting in June. And we can review the solar ordinance and answer questions during that meeting. And we can take comments from citizens.
So that would be Monday, June 13th.
Monday, June 13th. We don't need to take any action tonight other than that.
June 13th.
But we will schedule it on our agenda for June 13th. Okay. All
One
right.
more thing, if I may. Are you expecting at that meeting a detailed analysis of how the ordinance affects all of the properties in Portsmouth? Or are you just expecting an explanation for the ordinance as it stands now?
I think we had, Gary, I think we had something prepared back for the November meeting, which I think reviewed those potential changes and how they would affect the parcels. So maybe we just got to revisit that prior to the June
Yeah,
meeting.
Mike Asciola presented the potential impacts of the
Yes,
changes to a certain extent.
Yes, he presented the potential impacts that I produced, that I analyzed and produced. That did not include all of the proposals for the amendments to the zoning ordinance, only the few. If you want me to do an analysis of just the amendments to the ordinance that were adopted, it would be slightly different.
Can you make an alteration to the zoning map that would show all of the places where it's no longer allowed and put in a 150-foot setback if it's next to, I don't know how much work this is in GIS. 150-foot setbacks from residentials and the lots that would be allowable. I mean,
It's a great deal.
Medium
That
and
might be a
large
lot of
only.
work.
It's a great deal.
No,
of
because there's
work.
not a lot of
Actually, not that
commercial and
much.
light industrial property.
It's a great deal of work, but in this particular case, it probably affects maybe half a dozen parcels in town.
Right.
So, yeah, we'll do that.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Gary. We don't want to make your last month and a half too.
Oh.
So that would be for our June meeting, and that would be June 13th meeting. So that would also be in the backup prior to the meeting, so folks would have a chance to see it as well. Right. Okay. All right.
So the planning board's off the hook.
Planning board's off the hook.
But you're welcome to come.
Yes,
Always.
join us.
Always.
I think he's busy that night. All right, let's move on. Under new business. Yep. First item is fireworks display on town property. Chief Ford.
Council President, members of council, good evening. Hope everybody's doing well. So I wanted to bring this to you tonight, just so for your attention and decide where we want to go with these type of events. Typical firework events, when Thrive does it, the Aquidneck Club, Escobar Farm, the owner of that property contracts with the pyrotechnic company. That company, the shooter, person who's going to shoot the fireworks, deals with the state fire marshal, filling out an application. The fire marshal's office deals with all the, making sure they have insurance and they're qualified and they're in good standing and so forth. Then we get a copy of that permit and we review the safety plan. And we make a determination for details or if there's a necessary for exits. We've had some places that might have been fenced in and so forth. It normally goes very smoothly. The fire marshal went and inspected this location and is all set with the plan as it stands. But then he brought it to my attention that one of the unusual factors here is when we deal with Thrive and Escobar and the Aquidneck Club, it is the owner of the property who is hiring out for that pyrotechnic company. They're giving permission to them to shoot off fireworks on their property. And in this case, it's town property, at least in my view. So I wanted to bring this to your attention and maybe we could determine how we handle this one and how we may handle matters in the future when it's on town property. Obviously, if someone wanted to have a little wedding ceremony on Sandy Point Beach, we wouldn't want them to also hire a fireworks company and shoot off fireworks there. So I bring this to your attention. Now, normally when we get these applicants, these applications from the state fire marshal's office, they're very close to the venue date. Sometimes we're anticipating, we know the fireworks are coming to Escobar's and it's amazing how little notice we get. These fireworks, this wedding that's planned here is actually for the 12th. So it's coming up quickly. But there may be some in the future. I did reach out to the people that run the Glen for the town. They've had them before, not in my time. So it's been quite a few years. The woman told me that at one point way back, they did go to the council and then they didn't go to the council. So I'm here bringing you this information and see what you want to do with this particular situation and those moving forward.
Thank you, Chief. Well, I mean, we should be working with our vendor that if fireworks are an option, that we are the applicant or the town is aware.
It's our property.
That we're at least giving them permission to do it. We probably do need to establish some guidelines, so for hours and things of that nature.
Chief and I have talked about this at length. I've talked to Katie. What we would recommend is that we would approve this. It's gone through all the vetting procedures except coming to the council, which we're bringing it to you tonight. So we would recommend you approve this one for this coming Thursday, and that we would come to you with a policy regarding any future requests that would have to be adhered to.
That makes sense.
Yeah, we don't want to upset a bride 3 days before her wedding.
No, so, I mean, I'm assuming that all the approvals are approved.
Yes,
So,
it's-
yeah.
we're good to go with this.
So,
It's all set. Very
Unfortunately, they
reputable.
won't be blowing like it is today. So that would be bad.
yeah.
Can I, just one comment? I mean, certainly fireworks were not in my budget when I got married, but I don't know if this is gonna like become a thing. And like, is there a scenario where we have like fireworks every Saturday night down there? I'm not sure that's
I'd be up to you.
a situation we want.
Well,
So
that's
I,
why we're gonna
frequency
get a
would be a
proposed
concern also.
policy,
Well,
yeah.
but this is also a Thursday night.
Oh,
So
on a
this-
Thursday
this-
night,
This
yes.
should be early, not.
So yeah, fireworks every Thursday, Friday and Saturday. Joking.
I don't think that these should go off after 9 o'clock. I don't know if we can make that a stipulation. It gets dark around 8ish now. I don't know what time they're shooting them off.
Yeah, anybody with dogs in the neighborhood is not gonna appreciate it every week.
Kids that have to go to school in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't have a time in the application, doesn't address that.
Yeah. Our
So that's
policy
something
should
that
address
should-
time,
Right.
frequency.
I would think at this,
Procedure,
it's
et
not a
cetera.
big display, I'm told, and it's already 8:15. It's
Right.
pretty dark out, so I don't think this would be an issue this time of year.
Right, but it's a Thursday night and I don't want to see them shooting them off at 11 o'clock when the wedding service is over, type of thing. So that
Yeah.
should be done before 9, I would think.
Okay,
That would be my only request because it is a school night. It's a Thursday. If it was Friday, I wouldn't feel as bad.
we can certainly get word to Kate to pass that along.
Thank you.
Turn the clocks ahead.
No later.
Yeah.
What's that?
Just turn the clocks ahead.
Anytime between 9 and 9:05, I'll tell
Yeah.
Anytime before 9. I
Sounds
just don't want
lovely.
to, I don't want to hear them going off at like 11 o'clock. People have to get up for work in the morning. Kids have to go to school in the morning. And it should be some type of procedural basis that, I don't know how we get the word out to neighbors, but,
Right.
to let them know they're going off at 9 o'clock to,
Don't be alarmed.
don't be alarmed and lock up your dog. I mean, And certain individuals.
Microphone, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. President, I'd also request Mr. Rayner to talk to the trust, our insurance company, to make sure that we
We've already
comply.
done that.
Okay, thank you.
Good idea. So would you like a motion for us to approve this pyrotechnic display on May 12th?
Would you like me to ask for a motion?
No. I think we should make one. Make it official, I guess.
Yeah. So,
So that'd be my motion.
second.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Capson?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguirre?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
And on to number 2 here, which is the emergency medical service write-offs for town residents.
So I wanted to come before you and bring you this information. So you have it. And if there are any changes, I'm not here asking for change. I may have a suggestion, but it's really informative. It's meant to be informative for you. So when I first came here, you all understand we have a billing company that does our billing. We don't actually do it. It's always been I'll call it a rule, policy, a standard that we have done that Portsmouth residents, if you have a copay on the ambulance bill, that gets written off. You don't have to pay it. I usually have little to do with that because the Dawson Group, which has now been bought out by Corona's Health, they have that in their information. So they know when they see a Portsmouth resident and there's a copay, it gets absolved and I don't hear anything about it, nor does the resident. Once in a while, they may miss it. I'll have a resident call me, ask me how come they got a bill, and I'll take care of it. It's not a problem. We also have an informal agreement with Bristol, Middletown, and Tiverton, like a reciprocal agreement. If a Bristol rescue comes to you here, you call Portsmouth, we're busy, we send Bristol, you don't pay that copay because it was Bristol that showed up. They don't charge you that bill, and we don't charge it to the Bristol resident, if case being mutual aid. A few times, though, this policy I'll say it's gotten maybe a little stretched, where it has actually come down to it's the deductible. So, and we'll go over some costs in a minute, but with typical ambulance ride might be billed out at $1,700, and the insurance, let's say they're going to pay us $400, but you have a $250 deductible. that you haven't met yet that year. So they pay 150 and you're expected to pay the 250. I had an individual who was 500. Well, when you get absolved, or if you get absolved of that 500 to Portsmouth, your insurance company thinks that you paid that bill. So the next time you go to the doctors and you have a copay and a deductible, no, you don't have a deductible because it's been met because you paid Portsmouth, but you didn't pay Portsmouth. So I think that is stretching that. And I'm not saying that happens a lot of the times, but it happens. And then we also have situations where people have no coverage. And it seems like more and more I get the phone calls of the expectation. Why did I get a bill? I'm a resident. And it just has gotten to the point where sometimes I think it's getting a little excess, but that's for you to decide. The other thing that comes into play is these are all based on standard rates, industry standards. We also have mitigation charges. So that can occur in a couple of ways. One, if you get in a car accident. Now, besides the medical coverage that you're getting billed for the ambulance ride, a fire apparatus goes there. Incident command is taken over at the scene. The apparatus may be used for blocking of traffic for safety concerns. My guys disconnect the battery to eliminate some electrical hazards and ignition hazards. They may put down absorbent for fuel leak, oil leak, transmission leaks. They may pull a charged line for fire protection or use the jaws to pull you out of the car. Those all have a set fee. It's a mitigation charge. There are also other times where you call for a rescue, maybe you're having chest pains, and we go out to that home and they do an EKG, they do a set of vitals, they talk to the people, and now they don't want to go to the hospital. And against advice, they don't go, they sign a release. But that results in a charge. We provided a service, and it results in a charge, which I am often asked to eliminate because I'm a resident. And again, if that's the way we want to keep it, I want to make sure that you are aware that I think maybe the original policy or the original thought of absolving people of the copay has morphed into something that is a little bit more than that in many cases. Now, there's a couple of different things how I look at this. I think about the residents. I think about the three neighbors that one neighbor pays a lot of money every month and he has the best health coverage plan there is. And he has no deductible and no copay. It costs him a lot. And the next neighbor over maybe has just a fair plan and there's a $500 deductible like mine and there's a copay. And then there's a neighbor who doesn't have any plan, doesn't cost them anything, he has no plan. Well, when we take those three individuals to the same hospital, we end up with three different payments, and in one case, maybe nothing at all. If we absolve the copay and the deductible, that may be more than what we get from the companies. So that one, we end up eating the whole thing. It's a lot. And in year 21, January 21 to December, it was $127,000. The year before, January 20 to December 20, was $192,000. So it's quite a bit of money that we're talking about. Again, a lot of that, I should say, is the normal copay. But in there are those other things, the mitigation charges and the deductibles that are in there and the ones we write off completely. I would recommend that at a minimum, we charge the Medicare rate. Now, what happens, a lot of times people will call me. I may have someone with no insurance and they call me up and they're very concerned and they can't pay the whole bill, but they're willing. It's very surprising. If people, look, I want to pay something, I need to pay. Is there anything you can do? And what I will typically do is call our billing company and say, what is the lowest rate we could expect to get other than Medicaid, which we'll talk about in a second. So then I'll tell that person, listen, if you write a check out for $350, we'll write off the rest of it. And they're always quite happy when we can work with them. And I think we should, but we should have, I think we should have it more of a standard that we're going to go to that Medicare rate of all things. And we're not going to do the deductible because you get credit for that. You won't pay it. If you don't pay us, you won't pay the doctor when you go to his office either, because your insurance will think you've covered it. If you take on the mitigation charge, thing that I would recommend is that we knock it in half. That 500, it's typically a $500 charge, that mitigation of the other work being done there. That would be my recommendation. But again, I'm comfortable with, I shouldn't say I'm comfortable. What we're bringing in, we've been living with, but I think there's a lot being left on the table and it's not distributed fairly versus the person with one plan and the other.
Chief.
Yep.
Just quick, those mitigation charges, like the kitty litter and all that fun stuff, you can't charge that off to the car insurance?
We always try to go to the car insurance first, the billing company. If you get in quick, which is a problem sometimes, most people, their coverage for that aspect is very minimal. It might be 2,000, might be a 4,000, 5,000 coverage. The tow company's in there, maybe the person you hit, they got their car in the shop already, their insurance is after it. Well, motor vehicle accidents, if we get in and paid by the motor vehicle insurance policy, we get 100%. But there are many of the insurance companies, and I don't know the breakdown if it's the vehicle or the health, but there are many that will not even discuss the mitigation charges. They just say, no, we're not doing it. It's their policy. And because we are in network providers with several of these, we're bound by what they say. So again, someone has a particular insurance company, we get that $500 mitigation charge. Your neighbor doesn't have that company, they have somebody else, we don't get it. If you take a quick look at the sheet I gave you, these are some numbers I asked the company to run for me, just general numbers. But if you just look at the ones I've highlighted for that, BLS, basic life support, transportation, $1,590. And then there are others, the ALS and the ALS 2, that's different levels of advanced life support. But look at the basic BLS transport. So we charge $1,590, Medicare pays us $412. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Rhode Island, we get $256. If it's an out-of-network company, we get the $1,590. Look at Medicaid, $70. Obviously, that doesn't come anywhere close today. That doesn't cover our fuel going to Rhode Island Hospital. The vets and motor vehicle, Veterans Administration and motor vehicle accidents, if we're under that insurance, we get the $1,590, and then workman's comp, $394. So you can see that typically we're not getting a lot of money for our calls. And then, so we may get someone that has even Medicare, and they have a $1,590 bill, Medicare pays us $412, but they say, well, that person has a $100 copay, so they pay us $312. And we're absolving that copay. So in Medicaid, we're not getting anything. So again, I bring this to you as information. I think that we might want to look at tightening up those rules a little bit, especially on the deductible. Again, people get credit for that. So why wouldn't we expect that we get paid? If that person had gone to his physician first, if the ambulance ride was at the end of his calendar year for his coverage or her coverage, and they had been to the doctor a few times, they would have had to absorb that deductible on their own, and we would get our payment. But if they take the ambulance ride first, we don't.
Well, I think, this is kind of just the unfortunate reality of our healthcare system in this country. I won't go into a tirade about that. That is a bigger issue. I think it's all screwed up. There's really no way to know ifs, ands, or buts. I think the most shocking number actually is the Blue Cross Blue Shield, but that's just me. That said, I think changing this policy and reversing it really hurts our more, elder and more vulnerable residents, the people that can't afford to pay that bill. And I don't want to reverse a policy and put any Portsmouth resident in a situation where they're worried about calling you guys and calling for help and calling for an ambulance because they might not be able to afford the bill at the end of it. And I think the difference between paying a deductible to physician and paying a deductible to our fire department is that they are Portsmouth residents and they pay property taxes here to one extent or another. And I think if we just approved our budget and the amount of money that we invest to have excellent police and fire services, I do think it is a service that we should provide to our Portsmouth residents, that if they call an ambulance, they will get taken care of, they will get taken to the hospital, and they won't have a bill to worry about at the end of the day. So I personally am not in favor of changing it. I think it's unfortunate that people take it, that there's loopholes and it's a crummy system, but we're not going to fix the healthcare system with our policy. And I think this is a relatively small price to pay to protect the health and well-being of our residents.
If I may point out for the record, our policy is not to absolve anyone of their annual deductible, but it happens. I have had to explain to several people just what I had said to you. One gentleman, it was the year before though, when our billing company bills, like most billing companies, they send you a bill. First off, they wait, they see what the insurances pay. You get an explanation of benefits and it says it's not a bill because it's not all settled yet. If when they finally get to send you the bill, when they're comfortable that no more insurance is coming in, they send you a bill and if you were to ignore it, then 2 months later, you're gonna get another bill. And then 2 months later, you get another bill. Well, I had a gentleman recently that it was the deductible, but it was from the prior year. So in essence, it was a moot point now. He had gone the rest of the year and not had to pay that, but it was in the prior year. But he had another call. So I had to explain to him how the deductible worked. So it's not, I don't want you to get the impression that it is our policy to write that off. But I'm saying it happens. We catch it. Sometimes I have made deals with people. I really can't afford all of that. Is there anything you can do? I had a veteran call me one day. He was in his 80s and he asked me if he could pay $50 a month. I said, no, you don't, you're done. It's all set. We try to make arrangements. So, but I just didn't want you to get the impression that our policy is in fact that we cover the deductible. What I'm bringing to your attention is it can happen. I don't always get from, if you call me up and say, I owe $200, I don't know why you owe that $200. I don't know if that's your deductible or if that's your copay, or even if it was a mitigation charge when you just call me. So if I say to you, we'll take care of it, you're all set. And then I find out, oh, that was your deductible.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, this sounds like an insurance company problem, not our billing problem, because I'd like to see no Portsmouth resident get a bill for anything associated with ambulance transportation. That's why we live in Portsmouth and pay taxes. So it sounds like the insurance companies need to change how they bill for this stuff, and I don't know how to fix that.
Well, they need to change how they pay.
Exactly.
The billing's fine, it's the payment.
But that's not a problem we're gonna solve, really.
This is a national problem. Insurance and health insurance.
Exactly right.
Health insurance companies nationally use deductibles and co-payments to discourage people from seeking care. The result of that has been amply demonstrated in a number of studies that it as frequently prevents them from seeking needed care as supposedly unnecessary care. If somebody's calling for an ambulance, I think we have to assume that they feel that they're critically ill. And for us to then impose a charge on them and discourage them from seeking treatment for their chest pain, their pneumonia, their high fever is unwise and not to mention unjust. Our health insurance company system in this country is inherently unjust. It's inefficient, it's poorly run, and it is run for corporate profit, not for people's health and safety. So I don't feel like we ought to be participating in this process of fleecing people who are maybe in dire need. As far as the deductibles are concerned, I mean, do we have evidence that there are people who are calling for an ambulance transport early in the year just so that they can get their deductible out of the way?
No.
Of course.
Yeah.
I
Right.
wish I hadn't have just said that.
Right.
No, nothing of the sort.
So, I think, and just looking at that, thank you very much for providing this list of costs, because this is very eye-opening. The thing that I found the most appalling was the fact that Medicaid of Rhode Island doesn't pay you anything for the services you provide, which explains why Medicaid recipients frequently can't get care anywhere for anything. So I agree with the Councilor Abbott that I'm not eager to see us charging full price or anything close to it for ambulance transport, because this is frequently requested in the heat of the moment, people who feel like they're critically ill, and for us to then, sort of ding them for that is, I just don't think we should be doing that.
And as I said right from the beginning, that's fine. I wanted to make sure that you were all aware that what I think started out as probably as one thing has morphed a little bit. And I wanted you to be aware of where we are today.
Yeah, I have no objection with us collecting from their insurance company.
Okay.
The more
Nor
you
do
can
I.
do that, the better. So I'm all in favor of that. But for, your 90-year-old veteran who God knows what was wrong with him, for us to be going after him because he had chest pain or he couldn't breathe or something like that, that's obscene. I mean, we shouldn't be even considering doing that.
Okay.
Mr. President, thank you. I second everything that's been said by my fellow council members. What I would be looking for is something that a regularized policy, something that is more controlled and knowable, and so that when you retire, your successor doesn't have to figure out his own new policy and make his own ad hoc decisions, but rather that there's a policy on how what we accept, what we don't accept. I wouldn't want to use the word forgive, but rather charge, our rates are the rates, it costs what it costs, and how we charge residents for that or not charge them is a policy we should adopt. I assume, since you gave us numbers on 184,000 in FY21, to date through March was 77,800 and change, that those funds are somewhere in a line item in the budget we just provisionally approved.
They are not.
So where are these expenditures? How are these expenditures being
They
covered?
don't.
So
Our revenue is projected based on last year's and years
Got it.
before, which
So-
include not getting those
So in
funds.
addition to
These are
having,
services we're providing. We're
Right.
paying for the materials, the personnel, but we're not collecting the charges.
so
these are
in
potential-
addition to having a regularized, if you will, at least this. These things are in flux and there's always going to be outliers. But in having some more standardized policy, then maybe we can do some more standardized budgeting around it if we're lucky. Obviously, the number of calls you get in a year is a wild card. Hopefully you get fewer rather than more.
One of the things that I am looking into with Corona's Health, in fact, I talked to the girl again today. I had gotten her a contact person. As an example, I can say that the city of Fall River was, as we are, considered a provider. When you're, as the doctor knows, you're a provider of Blue Cross, you have to accept their fee structure. Fall River and many, many communities in Mass several years ago opted out. They're no longer a provider. So they are an outer network. So they get the full amount on their Blue Cross coverages.
Yeah, can you pull out of Blue Cross?
We're looking into that.
And
When it happened in Mass, there was a threat at the time, or there was insinuation that they would pay the bill, but they would send it to their insured. And then the chase would be on for the fire departments. That was up in the State House. There were a lot of meetings on it. And I know right now, Fall River is not a provider. I happen to run into the person who does the billing in the city now. And she said to me, I got a question for you. How do you guys survive on what you get for rates? They got out of the Blue Cross and they get the whole amount. So again, I'm looking into that with Coronas to see what they think about it, asking them to get in touch with people and see what we can do. See what the downside is, if any.
Chief, I'm surprised you're able to waive the deductible. If a physician does that, it's considered fraud and we're liable. Insurance company can actually sue us.
I was told by Kim Dawson, who was the owner of the Dawson Group, which is now Coronas Health, that we were supposed to have a budgeted line and take that out each time. I know when I was in Massachusetts and all that transpired, that was brought up that if, and basically the way it was explained to me is if you have a $1,000 bill and but you'll accept 800, well, you no longer have an $800 bill. I mean, $1,000 bill, you have an $800 bill, and therefore the insurance will pay their portion of the 800, not the 1,000. But that's out of my realm of expertise as far as down in, real down and dirty EMS billing. We rely on Coronas to do that for us.
Chief, can I ask a question? You were saying Massachusetts dealt with this at the state level. How did they do that?
I know the Chiefs Association in Mass was much more involved in the, from my understanding, my experience with the State House. And I personally, with other chiefs, went to several meetings at the State House on this actual situation with the Blue Cross and the fee structure. They wanted to lower it and make it consistent. The reality is, if you have a department like the city of Fall River, that their ambulance ride is a half a mile to the hospital, and then you take Westport, Mass, who down on East Beach, they have a 30-minute ride to the hospital. There are different expenses that those departments incur. And they wanted to just have this flat fee structure. And there was a lot of hearings and so forth. I don't recall what the final legal outcome was. I had left by then. But again, I know in the city that they're collecting a lot more from their Blue Cross patients than we do. And we are consistent in Rhode Island. It's not that it's Portsmouth. We are consistently low. I've been told by Kim Dawson that we, Rhode Island, have the lowest recovery of fees in the nation.
So do we need a vote? I think we have, there's already a plan that they've discussed about putting together
I think we need I don't think it's actually a written policy anywhere, Chief. Right?
That's what we're
It
saying.
is not.
It's always just been, we take care of the copay.
So
I
should we
think we
come
should-
up with a standard policy?
We should have something in writing
Right,
that came from the council that says,
this is the policy.
this is the policy. And
So
up and down
moved,
vote on
or,
it.
I mean, do we need to?
I think we need to ask
Sure.
the
Yeah.
chief and just what we have been doing, formalize it in a policy so that you have something to back yourself
And bring
up.
it back to us.
Okay.
But it should be, we typically it's a copay that gets waived. But now we're going into all the other fun stuff that comes into it. So deductibles and things. Deductibles can be at the discretion of the chief. But which is what it is now.
Let's bring that back
Yeah.
to the council. Right, and then we'll discuss that.
Okay, I can put something together with Mr. Rayner.
And I'm always very afraid that the insurance companies will, it's kind of a Miranda Act. Anything we do can and will be held against us. So I would just say, be careful of our unintended consequences of having the insurance companies somehow treat us even worse.
I don't think they legally can, but they can try.
No, you would be surprised because,
Oh, I
for
understand.
example, even in our own supposedly good health insurance policy, they made it so that the deductible had to be paid first. And so there was no, for what used to be a $40 copay turned into a $400 because you have to use up your deductible first. And so you have to pay rack rate from the beginning. So that plus just enormous side. If I only waited till this year, colonoscopies would not have cost me $2,000.
Well, I.
No, but I'm just saying that there are, right? There are costs that people that have been changed. They just changed the names of them. And I'm just fearful that if we start doing things, that there'll be some sort of cascading effect with insurance companies withholding more money from us. I won't even get into that because we'll just give them even more ideas, but they certainly can do that.
So we'll start with getting a policy.
Yeah.
We'll circle back to the policy, come back to the council.
You didn't know you were opening a can of worms.
Yeah. All right.
But
Thank you,
it's out
chief.
there.
Thank you.
All
Thank you,
right.
Chief.
Next, it's correspondence.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye. Motion passes 7-0. On to future meetings. We have our regularly scheduled meetings of May 23rd, June 13th, and then we have our June 15th budget hearing. It's a Wednesday at the Portsmouth Middle School at 7 p.m. And then our next regular meeting is June 27th, back in council chambers.
At which the final budget will be formally adopted.
Yes,
The clerk's favorite night.
Indeed.
yes.
Gets to read the budget ordinance.
Preparing yourself. Large glass of water.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Ms. Jukusa?
Aye.
Ms. Abbott?
Aye.
Mr. Hamilton?
Aye.
Mr. Katzman?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Dr. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Aguilar?
Aye.
Everybody make sure you're saying happy birthday to the clerk. Today is the clerk's birthday.
Happy
Happy
birthday.
birthday.
That wasn't on the agenda.
Well, we're out
All right,
of session.
Take it back. Take it back.
Yes.